2019. Clerk Bowling, roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney.
Present.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Here.
Commissioner Urban.
Here.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Here.
Mayor Hopewell.
Present. For our opening ceremony, we have an invocation by Pastor Moise Ratsan of Kalamazoo Seventh-day Adventist Church. I ask that you stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, Pastor.
Thank you. Let us have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of life. And Father, we thank you that we can be here today. I want to pray especially, Father, for our leaders, that you may bless them with wisdom and knowledge and grace, that they may lead this community to be a place filled with justice, equality, freedom, peace, and prosperity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioners, we have two proclamations this evening. I don't know what on the agenda, which one it says first. Pride is first on the agenda, I believe, and it should be. And so we're going to call up all you wonderful folks that are probably here for Pride, probably. And the Vice Mayor will be reading this proclamation. Hello, how are you? Come on up.
I think before I begin, who in this room was born from 1984 or forward? So 1984 forward.
I wish.
So tomorrow I'm going to be standing with Governor Whitmer, Senator Moss, Representative Hoadley, and Sneller as we reintroduce the ELCRA bills again, right? The state's Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act bills. They have been introduced every 2 years since 1984. And Kalamazoo and the city of Portage and Kalamazoo Township are one of 40-some municipalities that have a non-discrimination ordinance, but we lack a statewide civil rights act that protects members of the LGBTQ community. So I got to get this message out. After the party this weekend, and we sweep up all the glitter, and we go home, and we recover with a brunch, it's time to go back and do the work. I need to see all of you at the Capitol. I need to see you contacting Brant Iden and sending out some action alerts saying, now's the time. We need to modernize our State Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity in a bipartisan manner in 2019. All right, now for the formal proclamation. Pride Month, Kalamazoo, June 2019. Whereas Outfront Kalamazoo has served the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community of Southwest Michigan for the past 32 years. And whereas during that time, the LGBTQ community has grown in the face of diversity to become a more safe, welcome, and visible part of the citizenry of the city of Kalamazoo. And whereas Outfront Kalamazoo's mission is to create a just, inclusive, equitable, and supportive environment in Southwest Michigan for people of all sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions. And whereas the people of Kalamazoo have actively supported their LGBTQ neighbors through overwhelmingly passage of City Ordinance 1856 at the ballot box in 2009, and in doing so approved a human rights ordinance to protect people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in housing, employment, and public accommodations across the city of Kalamazoo. And whereas the city of Kalamazoo has proudly hosted its own Pride Festival since 2007 and can lay claim to being one of the largest Pride festivals in the state of Michigan. And whereas Outfront Kalamazoo continues to provide LGBTQ and allied community members in need the access to resources necessary to help all people of our community to be happy, healthy, and productive members of society. And whereas the City of Kalamazoo and Outfront Kalamazoo celebrate diversity and embrace the city's values of belonging, economic opportunity, stability, equity, safety, security, and a sense of community and shared leadership to promote a community where everyone can love who they are. Now, therefore, on behalf of the 52nd City Commission, I, Aaron Knott, on behalf of Bobby J. Hopewell, the Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo, do hereby proclaim June 2019 as Pride Month of Kalamazoo and encourage citizens to join me in recognizing and supporting Outfront Kalamazoo for their contributions in strengthening our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hopewell. Thank you, Vice Mayor Knott. Thank you, Commissioners. We really appreciate this. In the words of Marsha P. Johnson, who helped start the first movement toward equality for LGBTQ+ people, she said, "I've got my civil rights," and then she proceeded to march to continue to get them for everyone else. And I'm really excited to be here with a wonderful group of people at Outfront Kalamazoo who are fighting for the rights of all people. And we hope that you do come and see us at Pride, and then we hope that you continue to support the work that we do in community to make sure that Southwest Michigan is just, equitable, inclusive space for all people. So thank you.
Our next proclamation is Gun Violence Awareness Day. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas every day...
Commissioner, hang on one second.
Come on up.
In orange or not in orange, please join me.
Whoa, I like it. Thank you, Mayor. Whereas every day 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, and whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be killed with guns than other developed nations, and whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from dangerous people, and law enforcement officers know their communities best, these individuals are the most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are best positioned to understand how to keep citizens safe. And whereas January 2013 would have been the 22nd birthday of Hadia Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later. And whereas to help honor Hadia and the Americans whose lives are cut short, and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June 8th, 2019 as the 5th annual National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color because hunters wear orange when out in the woods. And orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas by wearing orange on June 8th, Americans will raise awareness and honor the survivors and the lives we have lost to gun violence, and whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now therefore, on behalf of the 52nd City Commission and Mayor Bobby J. Hopewell, we hereby declare June 8, 2019 to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day in Kalamazoo, and encourage all citizens to support efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives.
Thank you. I believe that this is the fourth or fifth time that you've declared National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate your support. Thank you, Don. Over those 5 years, the discourse about gun violence prevention has changed, and we're at a point now where we can do something, and we will be very happy to stand with our friends at Pride this weekend. Because part of this is about disarming hate and doing something about the hate and the violence in our communities. And we appreciate your leadership in doing that in the city. Thank you. All guys in back.
Commissioners, in regards to the agenda, I'm going to make a change this evening. We're going to move item J1 to right now. In the agenda, I have to exit for another obligation to young people in our community, and I wanted to make sure I was here and participating in this discussion regarding the vacancy on the City Commission. I'm going to ask the clerk to speak to what has been done in the past, maybe make a few recommendations, and see if we're all in that same spot of maybe following the procedure that we used previously, and we will move from there to the process that he describes. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, I do have printouts of these slides at your place. I'm not going to go through them verbatim, but there's just a little bit of background of this process so far, where we've been. At the last meeting, the Commission decided to have a special meeting on June 10th to interview City Commission candidates, and so the discussion went, well, if we're going to interview on June 10th, then if we want to narrow that field of applicants, then tonight would be the night to do that. So going from there, we made the announcement that there's an open application period here, and by the time that application deadline hit on May 30th, we had received 15 applications. As I've communicated to you, one of those applicants, Yvonne Smith, her residency does not appear to be in the city, so she would not be eligible for appointment to the City Commission. But we have 14 applicants now. On Friday, I did send you the interview questions from 2015, so you can begin reviewing those. So next steps, where would we go tonight? Well, we've talked about needing to narrow the field of candidates tonight, if that's what the Commission wants to do. Then I would just like to confirm some of those meeting details for next Monday. It would probably be good to agree on an interview format at this point, some of those details, and then how we're going to handle interview questions. In terms of some of these items here, the meeting details, what's being proposed is 6 o'clock next Monday here in the Commission chambers. In terms of the interview format, and now some of these details are going to be what was done in 2015. Okay, so this is the recommendation, but it's coming out of what the commission did in 2015. When they interviewed candidates, now this is what would happen next Monday, the candidates did not receive the questions in advance. They were sequestered in the city manager's conference room prior to their interviews, so they couldn't hear the questions. Commissioners, I believe they asked 11 questions. That's what's on your list. In general, over time, it's usually been in the 8 to 10 question realm. Last time it was 11. And it was done in a round-robin fashion where you start with one commissioner and just kind of go around and then come back and ask the questions that way. And in terms of what the time the candidate had, they had 2 minutes for an opening statement, 90 seconds to answer each question, and 90 seconds for a closing statement. So that is, I don't know if you want to discuss each of these areas now.
Yes.
So I guess I'd be looking for some direction as to what the commission wants, if this is acceptable, or if there are any, discussions, desire to change things in these.
Commissioner Urbans?
Going to have a chance to update the questions that were from last time.
These questions are coming up. I think that was
That's
one
coming.
of the items that he had on the list.
Okay.
That's coming.
Yep.
So we can submit other questions to you after this meeting, or we have to do that now?
I will get, that's the next slide.
Okay. All right.
Format, any questions on the format?
That's good.
Good.
Okay, next.
Okay. Next, the interview questions. The way it worked last time is because the commission did not want to give candidates the questions in advance, then the challenge becomes how do you develop questions? How do the commissioners develop a list of questions to ask? What happened last time is that the commissioners sent their suggested questions to me, and I compiled those questions. Thank you. I compiled those questions. If there were duplicates, I combined them, and then I reviewed those questions with the mayor, and after that, we sent out the list of compiled questions to the commissioners. Then at the meeting, when you actually do the interviews, prior to conducting the interviews, there is a chance there at the very beginning for commissioners as a group to talk about the questions, do a kind of final review, any last minute changes, edits, so on and so forth. And so the recommendation, if you want to do it that way, if you could have questions made by the close of business on Thursday, that would give the mayor and I a chance to go over them on Friday and then get them back to you so you have a chance to see those in advance.
Good.
Questions? Okay, next.
Okay, so now to what we've talked about doing tonight, which is narrowing the field of candidates. The question would be, if you're going to narrow, the question would be, what applicants does the City Commission want to interview on June 10th? And that's an important question because someone asked me today, well, what if the commission votes tonight and one person gets 6 votes? Well, the answer to that question is, well, it depends on what the question was the commission was asking. If the question is who should be interviewed, then no, that doesn't automatically select them. That just means that that person would get interviewed. And the way that the commission did it 4 years ago was that each commissioner selects no more than 5 applicants. They can select fewer, they just cannot select more. And then all of the applicants who received at least 2 votes would become candidates and they would be interviewed on the 10th. And the way it works is there's a paper ballot here. There's a spot for your name at the top. We would want that so that we can see there's a record of how each commissioner votes, and I will be reading that. And then this is where you mark those 5 or however many you decide. And then I have a tool here that I can use to calculate that and display it so that people can see.
One of the items under this is do you have, and I'm not sure you said this, Mr. Clerk, and maybe you did, so forgive me, are there amount of individuals you want to move forward? So you may get down, who knows, you could have 12 people that receive 2 votes, and that would mean 12 people move forward unless we narrow that, which that's what we did in the past, to a number that we would move forward for interviews. And this happens in interview processes all the time. I'm an advocate for narrowing into some number, certainly less than 12 for me, but that's something you need to consider now. And what would happen if there are 12? And were you going to go in this? If I'm messing around here, let me.
Well, not really. 4 years ago, after that first vote, we had 6 selected. We went from 15 down to 6. So the commission was satisfied at that point and said, yes, let's not go any further. Let's interview the 6. There's options. You could do another round, reduce the number of people you can vote for, or increase the number of votes a candidate has to get to be interviewed, or there are options at that point.
And the challenge of not, just my thinking, the challenge of not setting a number now means that you will know your person that you want to move forward may be on that list, and multiple of those people may be on the list, and you may struggle to narrow that down. I mean, I guess it's the same way as if we vote on it and we have 9 people and we're going to go to 7, you'll still know, but, or if I just pick 7 out of the air. We really need to determine, is narrowing down going to happen, or are we going to just let the process go and see where we land, which you could do that as well, Commissioner.
We just pick a limited, the maximum number of candidates that we'll interview before we start. And just to start the discussion going, I suggest that the number need be no greater than 7.
Commissioner Anderson.
Just running some rough math here, if you say about very efficiently asking and answering the questions with the time allotments that we kind of seem to have consensus about, you're talking about minimum of 20 minutes per person, not including time coming and going and this and that. So if we have 6, I mean, that we're talking about 2 hours right there, just in interviews, whatever might happen in discussion after that. So that starts driving it to, I mean, to me, that's really the top end of how far we'd want to go. 6 for sure. I mean, I would lean even towards 5. I mean, I don't know why 6 is a magic number, but the more people we have, the longer a meeting is. I don't know how long the discussion is going to be on the decision after all that, but just trying to keep it, I guess, humane length of time.
I've heard 5.
I can live with 5.
Yeah, and actually, Commissioners, you probably need to speak that so we know who said 5.
Well,
So we've got a 7 down at the end,
yeah.
a 5.
5.
I'm good with 5.
I'm good with 5.
I wanted 6, but the 5s have it, so
I wouldn't mind 6.
I'm okay. All right, Mr. Clerk? Commissioners, before you vote, I'm going to ask the audience if they have any comments on this process. If you do, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
Jeff Messer, city resident. So if we have questions about the process, I don't know, at some point I would prefer that you select someone who's not going to run for city commission this November. That would be my #1 criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else? So I'm going to take this and comment on it before you vote, commissioners. We don't know all of who's going to run or not going to run. But here's the thing. I believe if you're willing to serve, and you're capable of serving, and you serve, this is my belief, for this 5-month period or whatever, and you do well, why would that person be restricted?
No.
We can't control the circumstances that we had to fill this seat. That's not within our control. It's not even within our control to say you must not run again. Yeah, you could not select them, but to me, it is the situation that it is. We didn't get rid of anyone off the commission. It happened. Circumstances have it that the election is around the corner. Someone has to sit here. If they run for commission, for me,
It's okay.
so be it. If they don't, so be it. But restricting them from that opportunity, that would have restricted us from having Commissioner Cunningham here now, which I just don't think that would have been a good thing, my friend. So, yeah, I'm not supportive of that. I'm supportive of, whatever happens, and the citizens get to determine who sits on the city commission as they do every single year, every single election.
Right, vote.
We okay to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, remember you need to put your names on them, and they need to be dated as well, if my memory serves. Oh, mine is there.
Date, you got to put date on it?
Yes, put the date on it as well.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Do we have any music we can play?
While the clerk is going through his process, I want to personally thank all those that step forward to serve their city. We have one seat. There's 14 of you. Not everyone can sit in this seat. And looking at the applications, at least for me, I won't speak for the rest of the commission, we had outstanding candidates. We all have different spaces and thinking and all of that regarding who should fill this next months. But we don't want that to discourage you from serving in other ways or continuing to serve in the ways that you are. Or, as you know, there is an election coming up in November. Feel free to run for that office and gain this opportunity. And, my gut tells me there's going to be at least a couple opportunities for folks to sit on the commission in this next election. Thank you all.
appears there are 9 who've received at least 2 votes.
Yeah, well, that's true. There's 5 that are in the top 5. And then there's the rest of the pack. So, your pleasure, commissioners? Oh, Mr. Attorney, what are you advising?
I mean, the discussion was 5. There was nothing in, I didn't hear anybody say, if you got at least 2 votes, you were in.
All right, that was
So
not part of the procedure, is that correct?
I presented it as what was done last time. So, but then a hard number was set at 5.
Oh, I got you.
So,
But commissions, you know,
Yeah,
you can do what you
can
want.
do whatever you want. Commissioner Urban?
You do have 5.
well, I was going to suggest that we simply do another round of voting and using the number of the candidates who got at least 2 votes, we can choose among them and see if we can get it down some more. Does that help?
Well, so we have a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, and a 3. So that's 5 individuals that are in the top. So if we conduct the round with the others, what does that get us other than a 6th or a 6th person when you've limited to 5? So I see what the attorney's saying.
All right. Just do another round with all the people who got 2 votes.
Right, but what I'm saying is we already have 5.
Oh, well
So
then-
if we do another round, that would be the
that won't help
6th
then.
person.
Yes,
So
I
if you
see.
want to add a 6th,
No, I'm sorry.
I have no issue,
I'm okay.
because that's what I wanted. Commissioner?
I would advise that we just take the top 5 based on who has more than 3 votes.
More than 3 or 3 or more?
3 or more.
I'm sorry, 3 or more votes. Thank you.
Commissioners? Commissioner
Support.
Anderson?
Is that a motion?
That is my motion, yes. A motion that we take anyone who receives 3 or more votes
Okay. Now, you
in the
don't
top 5.
need a motion. but-
Don't need a motion?
Well, we were doing this by consensus, so
Okay.
we're following what you've already said you wanted, you set forward. And you voted by your ballot, so that's your vote.
Yeah.
So it looks like, if I read this right, we will be interviewing Patrice Griffin, Megan, I'm going to say it all wrong, Buwalda, sorry. Estevez Juarez, okay, I'm messing up. John McNeil and William Wells. Those will be the 5 candidates for interviews on June the 10th. The clerk will follow up with each of you and give you instructions and ask you to abide by the rubric that he will provide you that night. So with that, we will see you on June 10th, 1 week from today. And with that, Madam Vice Mayor, the floor and podium stage is yours.
Approving the agenda. Okay, so
See where we are.
C,
Yeah.
so adopt the formal agenda to remove anything. Yep. All right, we are at item C, the adoption of the formal agenda. If anybody in the audience wants to remove an item from our consent agenda? One. Are there any other items? And then now we just go to approving the. Okay, commissioners, do you want to remove any items from the all right. Up next is communications, or excuse me, up next is our consent agenda. City manager? We'll get it together. We are at communications.
Yes, one item this evening, the mayor will give the Kalamazoo State of City Address on Thursday, June 13th at the new Exchange Building at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Rose Street. Doors open at 5:30 p.m. and the program begins at 6:15. Seating is limited, so anyone wishing to attend is asked to register in advance. Instructions for registration will be on the city's website beginning this Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we will be meeting next Monday at 6 p.m. here in the chambers to interview the candidates that were selected this evening as a special commission meeting.
Great. Next, we have the consent agenda. City Manager.
Approval and acceptance of easements for water main that will be installed as part of the Gilmore Farms West Condominiums construction project. Next is the approval of bylaws for the Natural Features Protection Review Board. Next is are the approval of the mayor's appointments to Natural Features Protection Review Board. First, the appointment of Ashley Cole Wick for a term expiring on March 31, 2020. Next, the appointment of Aaron Fuller for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. Next, the appointment of Robert Glasser for a term expiring on March 31, 2021. Next, the appointment of Mitch Letow for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. Next, the appointment of Paul McNellis for a term expiring on March 31st, 2021. Next, the appointment of Kyle Martin for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. And finally, the appointment of Alan Sylvester for a term expiring on March 31, 2020. And finally, the approval of the appointment of Beth Ann Vanden Hamburg to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate member for a term expiring on March 31, 2021.
Commissioners, the requested action is to approve items 2 through 5 on the consent agenda and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Cooney, seconded by Commissioner Cunningham. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The items on the consent agenda are approved. The formal agenda, City Manager.
Item F1, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Portage, Department of Public Safety for a strategic operations and intelligence analyst, and approval of an additional full-time equivalent position allocation for the Department of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any citizens who would like to comment on this item? If so, please come to the podium, state your name, and whether you live in the city. You will have 4 minutes for your comments.
Jeff Messer, city resident. According to the 6-page report for this agenda item, the 3 intelligence analysts at the new Kalamazoo Strategic Operations Center will conduct predictive crime analysis. Is that the same thing as predictive policing? Is the city of Kalamazoo planning to establish a pre-crime unit like in the movie Minority Report or totalitarian communist China? Has Chief Thomas previously given a public report on her department's predictive crime analysis system? If not, now would be a good time for her to present an overview of KDPS's program and address widespread criticisms of predictive policing programs across the nation. Some questions for Chief Thomas to answer. What data sources will the predictive crime analysis system use? What vendors and software will be used for predictive crime analysis? Will the system be making predictions about future crime in specific geographic areas, specific homes and buildings, and/or individual persons? Please address discrimination, profiling, and racial bias claims about predictive crime analysis systems. More broadly, I would like to see this commission adopt something like San Francisco's ordinance number 190110, which requires public input and approval from the Board of Supervisors before agencies implement surveillance technology such as facial recognition, biometrics technology, license plate readers, and predictive policing software. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the commission on this issue? Seeing no one, Commissioners, the recommended action is to adopt this item, F1. Is there a motion?
I move that.
Support.
I would like to have some discussion on it, though.
We'll get to that. So we have, it's moved by Commissioner Urban, supported by Commissioner Anderson. Is there any discussion?
Could the chief come forward and speak about the reasons they're doing this and how it will be implemented?
Good evening. I would like to address those comments. The predictive policing analytics platforms are not what we plan on using. When we say predictive policing, we're talking about a joint enterprise using the data we currently collect in order to put officers where crimes are occurring. We do that currently through our directed patrols, when citizens call. So when we say predictive policing, that's something we do every day because we're trying to get ahead of crimes that might occur and prevent those. So when we have, let's say, a string of armed robberies, we put directed patrols because we predict that another armed robbery could occur, let's say, at a party store. So it's something we do every day, and we do it with the data that we collect. We do it from information we get out of the neighborhoods. So we right now have no plan to use predictive analytics. We haven't demoed any, chosen any, selected that, because that's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is bring all our data to one location so that we can use that as a crime prevention tool, a crime investigation tool, and we know that crime has no boundaries, and that's why we're trying to bring our partners on in doing this. Artificial intelligence is not an area that we're comfortable with yet in law enforcement, and we're well aware of the critics in this area. So that's not what the Strategic Operations Center will be doing. It's using intel analysts, civilians to do that back-end work so that officers and detectives can be out there doing police work and investigation work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cooney.
So, Chief, if you were going to think about artificial intelligence, facial recognition technology, you would come back to the commission to ask about that?
Absolutely. I'm not comfortable with that technology in policing by any means.
Right.
That or license plate readers. That.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes?
Vice Mayor Knott.
Oh.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
The motion passes. Item G1, City Manager.
Approval of an intergovernmental agreement, oops, sorry, didn't scroll. First, adoption of an ordinance repealing sections 22-3 through 22-5 of the Kalamazoo City Code, which were replaced by recent amendments to Chapter 21, nuisances.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any citizens who'd like to comment on this item? If so, please come to the podium, state your name and whether you live in the city, and you will have 4 minutes for your comments. Seeing no one, Commissioners, the recommended action is to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So move.
It's moved by Commissioner Anderson, supported by Commissioner Urban. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
The motion passes. Item G2, City Manager.
Adoption of an ordinance repealing Section 22-53, loitering, and Section 22-56, loitering in places where controlled substances or drug paraphernalia are sold, dispensed, of the City Code of Ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any citizens who would like to comment on this item? If so, please come to the podium, state your name and whether you live in the city. You will have 4 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Maddie Jordan Woods, and I live in the city. I am here tonight to oppose repealing the loitering in places where controlled substance or drug paraphernalia is being sold or dispensed in the city. Our neighborhood is the neighborhood that gets hit the hardest when these things happen. We cannot, it has been 4 years with the X train, and there isn't enough or a plan to stop that in our community. And now we're talking about the one tool that was used so the residents could have rest. so the residents could be there is being taken out. Loitering in places where they can be controlled substances or drug paraphernalia sold. So that means at the store, the corner store, where the kids are going, the store by the schools, everywhere that is in our community. And so I am here opposing that. And I understand that there's been this great plan saying that, oh, it was discriminatory and that it was only used in certain areas with only black people. But you know what? Only black people were the ones who couldn't go to sleep at night. And the people that lived in the other communities, they get to come in our neighborhood and buy drugs, cause problems, and then they get to go back to their nice, clean neighborhoods and say we can live where there isn't any drug paraphernalia at. So I am here tonight opposing it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the commission? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ben and I live in the city. I was just curious if you guys could comment on why these changes were being made quickly. I guess this one and maybe the next one as well when that comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Seeing no one, commissioners, the recommended action is to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson, supported by Commissioner Cunningham. Is there any discussion?
I am sympathetic to the concern that the director of the NACD expressed when she came up and spoke to us. However, there was some description that our city attorney inserted in our packet relative to the enforcement challenges related to this ordinance, and could we have our city attorney speak about that?
Certainly, thank you, Commissioner. As a rule, loitering ordinances are frowned on by the courts. There have been several decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court in particular that if you're just hanging out and you have no criminal intent, that can't be made a crime. And so there's the issue. Just because somebody happens to be present in an area where there may be a drug deal going on doesn't mean that individual is involved in the deal. Obviously, those folks who are involved in a criminal enterprise are breaking the law, but being near where a criminal enterprise is taking place isn't a crime, and that's what and so that is what we're attempting to do, is get rid of ordinance provisions that are of dubious constitutionality and criminalize seemingly potentially innocent conduct.
Just following up on additional expression of the concerns, are there other tools that can be used when we have occurrences like X-Train, for example, it happens in Kalamazoo? And do you have any answer about what those kinds of things might be if this one is, difficult to enforce?
In fact, this commission adopted a nuisance party ordinance just a couple of meetings ago, and it already is being used by our public safety officers. And it is, when you think about a party, you think about maybe at a stationary place, but the way we drafted the ordinance was an attempt to address moving parties, such as the X-Train. And so if there are certain behaviors that are occurring in association with a party, whether it's a moving group or it is at a particular residence, we can use that ordinance as a tool to break it up, if you will, and criminalize the conduct. Most of the thing, if it's a loud party, we did decriminalize it. You're going to just get a civil infraction. But if the party continues and the citation doesn't really calm things down and it becomes a problem for the neighborhood, and we list what is a nuisance party, there are certain aspects, certain conducts that create that problem, then it is a misdemeanor. And so this commission has already adopted an ordinance to address those issues.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Approximately about 4 years ago, this is one of the things that I really pushed for, is to have the opportunity to go back into these rules and these ordinances and decriminalize a lot of them. And correct, reluctantly, a couple of weeks ago, I myself reluctantly a couple of weeks ago voted yes to approve, our officers doing what needs to be done to address this X-train situation and scenario that we're running into. But one of the things that I really want to highlight on multiple platforms, and one of the things that I'm really working on in the background, is how do we get the community to give opportunity to these youth who have nothing better else to do with their time. So what does that look like? I know when I was a youth, I had Midnight League, and that was during that time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an activity during that time. It could be something during the day that gives them opportunity to burn energy versus having the ability to stay up half the night. Now, I do understand that, some of this is drug-induced behavior, which may, create some different types of caveats, but then that goes into healthcare and how do we address those needs also. So I think this is a multifaceted issue. I do, have a sympathy for those who may be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I hate to say it like that, just because of some of the behaviors that I once had. I know how I can get labeled by being in certain places or in certain scenarios. But overall, I sympathize with those who are trying to get rid of this X-train scenario. But I will be voting yes in regards to this particular nuisance.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham. Commissioner Urban? Nope. Are there any other, no more discussion? Okay. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
The motion passes. Item G3, City Manager.
Adoption of an ordinance to amend Section 22-41 of the Kalamazoo City Code regarding drug paraphernalia.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any citizens who would like to comment on this item? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and whether you live in the city.
My name is Maddie Jordan Woods. I live in 902 West Patterson, and I live in the city. For over a year, I sat on the state HIV/AIDS committee concerning HIV/AIDS, and you know what? I am here tonight to oppose amending the ordinance to allow for needle exchange. When the needle exchange program was implemented in Kalamazoo, it was implemented by CARES. The director of CARES said he would never allow for the drug exchange, needle exchange in gay bars, but he was fine with flooding the north side with it. And so when we talk about equity, I would say to you, Vice Mayor, where's the equity in that? Because organizations get to do these programs and they get to go home, or they get to decide where they are. And we don't have the resources. And Commissioner Cunningham, yes, you guys voted on that, but you know what? I'm still being woke up at night. That party, it was a vote on, but you know what? Live in our world where we can't sleep at night because there are rights to do that. So I say again, Commissioner Cooney, we just went through and talked about let's celebrate and let's stop gun violence. When yet on one breath we say that, but on another breath, we're saying let's enable the very behavior that is bringing the gun violence in my neighborhood. So at some point, we have to decide, you know what, where's the equity in the communities who don't have the resources to do that? We have people saying, hey, the data says that those who have needle exchanges, that their drug use is less and less, and they prove the data. Well, you know what? They must don't be in my neighborhood. But again, they get to stay in their nice neighborhoods and then talk about putting things in our communities that there is no oversight on what happens to the communities. When it came in our community, there was in the parks, they were in the playgrounds, they were at the bus stops, and the only thing that happened was that we're sorry. So I'm going to say again, and I see now that this ordinance and that it continues to be there, but you know what? We said we was going to do Imagine Kalamazoo. Well, I would like to imagine the north side without having to continue to have programs that other organizations, they make money and our neighborhood suffers. I would like to imagine that in Kalamazoo, in the north side neighborhood, that kids don't have to worry about getting stuck with needles that's left in the park. And more important, I would like to imagine in Kalamazoo that I don't have to be the ones that ask and address these issues for our community, because there's others that say, you know what, we've come up with these plans, X-Train isn't working, and now we're saying, hey, let's enable them. Ask a person that's drug addicted, and what they would ask is, you want to really help me? Help me get into treatment. Put the efforts, put the money into doing treatment. You want to ask my family? I have 2 family members that's in recovery. And you know what? Supplying them with needles did not help them get off drugs. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address this? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dr. William Nettleton. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo. I'm board certified in family medicine and also board certified in preventive medicine and public health. I practice clinical medicine and public health within the city of Kalamazoo. I'm here to support the amended changes to the city code regarding drug paraphernalia, which will accommodate a syringe service program. I think it's helpful for this discussion to define addiction. The National Institute on Drug Abuse defines addiction as a long-term, relapsing disease of the brain characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite harmful consequences, despite losing one's health, despite losing one's friends, families, and relationships, despite losing one's home, and despite losing one's job. Those of us who work with people who have addictions and persons who inject drugs know that not everyone is ready to stop. And for those who are ready to stop, not everyone is ready to stop at the same time. Therefore, we meet people where they are at to help keep them healthy enough, free from infectious disease, and alive long enough to engage treatment. That approach is known as harm reduction. Syringe services programs embrace this approach known as harm reduction. It's important to note that needle exchange includes the disposal of used needles and then the giving out of new needles as well. A syringe service program has more comprehensive services that goes along with that. Sometimes it's misconstrued about safe injection sites. Safe injection sites are different than syringe service programs and are illegal in the United States. Syringe service programs are allowed in the state of Michigan. It's important to note that syringe service programs do not increase the initiation, frequency, or duration of drug use. Syringe service programs also do not increase crime. This is well established within the scientific literature that goes back 3 decades of evidence. Syringe services programs do the following. First, we know that folks who engage syringe service programs are 5 times more likely to engage treatment. We know in communities that have implemented syringe service programs that needle stick injuries decrease amongst public safety officers. Folks who engage a syringe service program have opportunity to receive overdose education and naloxone, that drug that reverses an opioid overdose. The strongest evidence we have for syringe service programs is in the reduction of new HIV cases and the reduction in new hepatitis C cases. Because of that reason, syringe service programs are cost effective. The lifetime cost of a person living within HIV is approximately $400,000. For all of these reasons, every major medical and public health organization, including the American Academy of Family Physicians and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, recognize this as an evidence-based public health intervention. Governor Snyder's Commission on Drug and Opioids in July of 2018 also endorsed the expansion of syringe service programs throughout the state of Michigan. For all of these reasons, I recommend to the City Commission to adopt the amended changes in the city code for drug paraphernalia that will enable a syringe service program to serve, protect the health, and improve the health of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Doyle. I reside at 220 Buchanan. And excuse my attire, I just came from the gym. So I'm here as the Executive Director of CARES. We are the HIV/AIDS organization in Kalamazoo, but we also serve 10 other counties in Southwest Michigan. And I'm here to ask you today to vote yes on the amendment to the paraphernalia law to allow for a safe syringe program in the city of Kalamazoo. CARES would like to work with COPE and provide services out of the CARES office at 629 Pioneer Street in the Vine neighborhood to be able to provide a safe syringe program. I have sent an email, a document from the CDC. It's a fact sheet that I sent to all of you. I don't know if you all received it, but it outlines the reasons to have a safe syringe program, because it doesn't increase crime, because it does increase entry into treatment. It also helps clean up needle sticks from happening to not only people in the community, but also our public safety officers. So there's many reasons why we should be having a safe syringe program, and Kalamazoo is actually one of the cities in Michigan that doesn't have it because of this law, and many other cities have adopted this and they're providing services that helps people get into treatment, keeps them safe from HIV. When someone makes one step towards their health, and maybe it's just getting clean needles, they often make other steps towards that. So one thing I'll say is that the organizations that support the needle exchanges are American Medical Association, the American Public Health Association, the National Academy of Sciences, the American Nurses Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the American Bar Association, and the CDC. So one of the things you're going to find with the program that we're working on with COPE is that we're working with multiple partners, first of all, with Kalamazoo Community Mental Health, with SWIMBA, with Dr. Nettleton and the health department to be able to see what we can do to provide the best services. We're looking at having recovery coaches, so if somebody comes in and they want to talk about treatment, it's not just about the needles, it's conversations about treatment, and CARES is only providing the space. We're not getting any money, I'm not charging any rent, I'm providing an office, because this is that important that that's why I want to provide the space for free. So please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nancy King. I'm not a resident of the city. I am, however, the executive director of COPE Network. Syringe access programs are not enabling for substance use disorder. These are helping to keep people alive. It's a step in the right direction. It is a focus on harm reduction. Addiction is a complicated illness. It not just affects the person with the illness, but the family and the community. As a parent with a child who's experienced years of addiction, I know the toll it takes. If we offer programs that help the risk, we can help reduce the risk that people will die, whether it's through an overdose or through it's an illness associated with using IV drugs. The purpose of this program is to offer supportive services. As it was discussed, this is about helping people to achieve recovery process. It's not a matter of being able to go through one day and be able to say, today I'm ready. It's a multiple times. For many people, this takes years to overcome. We do know that the definition of chronic illness is relapse, and that's a problem. We don't look at somebody who has a problem with, who is a diabetic and be able to say, you know, if you'd been eating right, you could stop your insulin. You could be able to take care of that. But we also look at if they're not eating right, they're not taking care of their health, we don't take away their insulin. This is a harm reduction approach. It helps people to achieve that recovery process. It's something we need to think about from the big picture. I unfortunately lost my daughter to a heroin overdose. This is something that we face every single day. When we have people with the opportunity to be able to reduce the shame, the blame, the judgment, and the criminal perspective, it allows people to heal. They're more likely to seek out services that are not about shame. They're more likely to be able to achieve what they're trying to get to. I don't know anybody who wants to be a person who suffers from substance use disorder, but this is such an important part of their medical illness. It hijacks the brain in ways that nothing else will. When we know that it takes time to overcome, it takes support service, it takes a community. The question should be, how can I help you recovery, not why do you do that? I really encourage you to adopt this program. It is a step in the right direction. This is something that's occurring across the state. It is supported by the state of Michigan. Recently, we only had 3 syringe access programs throughout the state of Michigan. We now have over 8. Many of these are opening up in areas where there are high risk for HIV. We want to be proactive, not reactive. We want to be able to address the situation before it occurs. Unfortunately, we lose people every single day to an opioid overdose. But opioids are not the only substance that people will inject. We're seeing more and more people all the time that are coming down with illnesses that affect their life, whether it be communicable diseases, endocarditis, soft tissue diseases. I work with a lot of people who are in recovery, and it's a time process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Our systems are a problem. Somebody who achieves 18 days in recovery is only on the stepping stones to recovery service. They need to have continuous opportunity to be able to work with people who are there to support them to their recovery process as long as it takes. And it is a lifelong illness. So I encourage you to adopt this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Rowland. I reside at 1321 Cobb Avenue here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I just want to briefly speak about the exchange of the needles. There happens to be an encampment of homeless people that reside near our facility on Patterson Street. There's needles scattered everywhere. We are adoptees of the Martin Luther King Park. On Saturday, we were there. We were planting flowers. We had young people there. Needles everywhere. And so I have a concern. I know that they're on playgrounds, Lacrone Park. I see them, and kids actually bring them to us. I hear about the research, but where's the oversight, and who's going to monitor this to say that the right way would be to do the needle exchange if you continue to see that there's no concern for the person that is addicted to drugs? It's a terrible problem. But if you don't have the oversight, I know there's going to be groups of people that are in recovery that are going to take advantage of the services that some of the organizations just spoke about. But there's a big population of people that they're addicted to the drug, and what they do with those needles is the least of their concerns. They're scattered, they're everywhere. And when you have little babies bringing you needles, what they found they're excited about it, they don't know. And so I really don't know a whole lot about it, but when I did hear on the news, that is what inspired me to come down, because I see it. It's terrible at the Martin Luther King Park. Needles just everywhere in the grass. It's very dangerous. And so, again, I want to say, if we know that these people are going to take advantage of the program, that's one thing, but to be able to witness and to see it on a day-to-day basis. So I'm opposed to it at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Esteban Juarez, and I live at 1226 Washington. And in that community, I grew up on Washington. There's a lot of things that take place there that are unseen by good intentions, right? People who have good intentions. So the principles of the needle exchange is pretty good, right? It's awesome, right? But the methods of how that happens needs to not be the same, because we have these programs that have methods that make an impact in such a way. The thing is people like the needle exchange, people need to get out into the community and see for themselves what's taking place, so that they can learn how to impact these situations, right? So they have a lot of data, a lot of whatever, right, that supports this. But in Kalamazoo, I think we need to be more proactive in a way by getting into the community and understanding the problems and the deeper issues. Again, the lady said, drug addicts are not looking to exchange their needles. You know what I mean? I was addicted to drugs when I was a teenager. I was a crack addict for 4 years. I didn't care about anything about exchanging my needles or anything like that. That's not my concern, right? The mindset that drug addicts have that's the least of their concern. So I think the methods need to be thought about and really thought about in depth. The principles are beautiful. I think we need to help, right? We need to help that. But the methods have to change. It can't be just programs where we have people come to these facilities. We have to go to the people. We have to go and get more involved, right? If we keep expecting people to come to us so we can help them, it's not going to work. We have to go to them. We have to be able to see where they're at, put ourselves in their shoes so that we can understand it in a more in-depth way so we can make an impact. And so I'm kind of mixed between the supporting it and not supporting it. I think the principles, again, are sweet, but I think I'm not in favor of it unless the methods change. The methods have to change in order to see a deeper impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Ben, city resident. I know some cities have it where you can use the needles right there in the facility and then dispose of it as soon as you're done. Some of them even have nurses like give the drugs to you. Some of them in other countries even provide the drugs for you. I don't know. I know I see a lot of Coca-Cola cans on the side of the road, even with a 10-cent deposit. So I don't know if there's some way we can include something like that, but thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else looking to address the commission on this issue? Seeing no one, commissioners, the recommended action is to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney, supported by Commissioner Anderson. Is there any discussion?
Vice Mayor.
Commissioner Anderson.
First of all, I appreciate the very passionate comments, actually, interestingly, kind of on both sides of this issue, and that's very important. And I think one thing that's also very important to all of us up here is that a program like this does not result in disparate impact in a neighborhood in any negative way. So that's obviously a nuanced thing. But tonight, the decision we're making tonight is just rather to amend our own ordinance that prohibits this currently. It doesn't open the gates, to anyone doing any kind of needle exchange that they want to do subsequent to us taking this action. Any program has to come back to us for approval prior to instituting any process that would be related to this. I wonder if the city attorney could expand on that at all, just being clear about what this action is and what subsequent action would have to occur, for there actually to be a program described as a, clean needle or needle exchange program.
Thank you, Commissioner. First, I want to point out that this ordinance is authorized by the Michigan Public Health Code. So it is an option for local municipalities to adopt. We're not required to do it, but it is available for us to do so. And I would say that it's already been mentioned there are other communities that are doing it. I think it's Ypsilanti, Saginaw, Flint, Grand Rapids, among several others. I think maybe even Ann Arbor. And the idea is that a nonprofit agency would come before the city commission and say, we want to engage in a needle exchange program. This is just not this is an exchange program, and then they have certain criteria that they would have to demonstrate, and they would be authorized to run that program and have an exemption, because normally there's an exemption from a person handing out needles and devices that could be used for the use with controlled substances, and there are exceptions. I mean, for instance, pharmacists may hand out needles. They do that every day. But nonprofit organizations, because they are not generally a medical provider or in the medical field, aren't permitted to do that. It would be unlawful for them to do so. But this exception permits local communities to authorize these organizations to engage in the needle exchange program, and that's what we're doing here. So that a proposed agency would have to come before the city commission, detail, and it says in the ordinance what their procedures are in terms of picking up and disposing of used needles, written what their procedures are for distribution, the services that they're going to offer, and then they get a 2-year permission, and that at the end of the 2 years they would have to again demonstrate their history of what the services they provided, and again if there's any changes in their programs and policies. The one thing that I want to stress is that if you are an individual seeking those services, your name is not going to be reported back to the city commission. There's anonymity in that. All we are looking for is just data when the agency comes back and wants a renewal. We are not attempting to put anybody and put their name out in public that they use this service. I want to make sure that that's stressed. So the whole idea of this is to encourage people to use these services. I hope that answers your question.
Commissioner Urban.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Now, I'd like to make an amendment to this motion. I'd like to have there be a phrase added that says that this ordinance becomes effective when an agency that will provide needle exchange is granted permission to operate, and that the ordinance will stay in effect for 1 year, at which time it will expire unless there's evidence shown that there's that the overall prevalence of needles lying around and the overall benefit to the community is positive. So there's two aspects. One, it doesn't start until we actually have somebody who's qualified to operate the program in the city. Otherwise, we're going to have a gap period here where it's going to be like a Wild West, it seems like. Well, maybe we can divide it into 2 parts, but the part I'm especially keen on is that there be a sunset on this thing so that we have a chance to let everybody know that we expect to see some results from this that are positive, that the whole community can see. It's not going to just be put into effect and then we go about our business.
I'm going to defer to the city attorney.
Well, the commission can do what it wants to do in terms of the legislation. For my advice would be, I think the first suggestion, I don't think we're going to create a Wild West scenario. This creates the authorization for an agency to come before the commission and seek the permission to operate the needle exchange program. So putting the mechanism in place for any organization to come before the city commission is that's all we're doing. There's no needle exchange program that can be operated lawfully until the agency comes before the agency and comes before the commission and gets permission. So so I think that the first suggestion I would not suggest the commission adopt.
Excuse me, in the audience, there's a lot of chatter right now, and we're having a hard time with this conversation. Thank you.
The second issue is, do you want to put a sunset? Well, you can certainly do that. This does, as drafted, permits a 2-year authorization. And that creates a little bit of a legal conundrum is if this sunsets and somebody's got a 2-year authorization and it's sunsetting in the middle of their authorization. Now, the city commission is always free to repeal an ordinance. You can always do that. But sunsetting it is a little bit different as opposed to repealing it. Because under a repeal, I would opine that any authorization that was issued under the ordinance before it was repealed would continue. But when you sunset it, that's a little different matter. I have to do a little research on that.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, in the light of what you've advised us here and informed us about, it seems to me that a situation that might work is to have the sunset be for the period of 2 years, for the duration of that first permission that's granted, so that there is some incentive to monitor whatever program we set up, and something in place that allows the public to witness and hear reports on how this is working, and to let the city commission know what their opinion is about continuing it. I think that would provide some assurance to the public, because I can see if this program is not handled well, it could be lead to the problems that cause people to object. It seems to me this has a chance of being much better, but I think we have to ask whoever is doing this to show us it works.
Commissioner Anderson.
Just a quick question again. My impression is, Commissioner Urban, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is that review process is built into this as a required part of it, not as a voluntary part of it. But that 2-year review and that report and that consideration of whether to reauthorize is something that automatically occurs every 2 years, consistent with the statutory, framework that this is under. So that is kind of part and parcel of the work. Is first an approval. You have to come here for that. Then, that's only for 2 years. Then you have to come back and seek reauthorization, which includes providing data and having questions be answered in order to be reauthorized again. So it seems like that concept that you're talking about is cooked into what we're talking about. Could you correct me if I'm wrong on that, City Attorney, or misunderstanding it?
No, I think you've captured it. That's the whole point of getting that renewal and the requirement of providing a report as to the success of the agency's efforts. Now, and as far as I know, this program and our ordinance is based off the City of Grand Rapids Needle Exchange Program, which I think is in its 2nd year and is very successful. And so and again, the groups that would be engaged in this, and then you've heard the people come and speak, they know what they're doing. This is not a new idea. I would point out, and again, maybe I'm putting a little blame on my office, this program was originally suggested by Commissioner Sanabro, but it kind of got, because of other projects, kind of got in the way. But as we were going through our ordinance review, Commissioner Anderson renewed the idea, and it fit very well into that ordinance review, and that's why it's coming before you tonight. It could have, maybe should have, come before the commission 2 years ago, but be that as it may, there are models that exist in other communities that are very successful. I don't think that if this was authorized by the commission tonight, that we would face any different challenges, and hopefully the same amount of success that other communities have seen.
Commissioner Cooney, just 1 second. For the audience, Grand Rapids ordinance has been in effect for 10 years. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thanks for the people that came up. Nobody wants to see kids picking up needles and fooling around with them. So I would ask the city manager, if we know that the mayor's Martin Luther King Park is a place, I think we should be cleaning that up. I think we should get people out there to clean that up. And if we know other places in the city where there's a concentration of needles, it would seem to me we should be doing something about that. That's my first point. Second thing is, this is called a needle exchange. So are people turning in their needles and getting new needles? Is that what happens with this?
That's the intent, yes.
So that should cut down on the number of needles that are being thrown around, I would think. I think what Mr. Juarez talked about is really important. I think it's a separate problem. I think the problem of people using drugs is a huge problem that we have to look at. But I think it's a separate problem. And I think that there's a sense of urgency about that. We need to look at that, and we need to keep trying to do things about that. I'm strongly in favor of this program because I think it saves lives, and I think it could cut down on the people that are addicted. My understanding is that not only do people exchange needles, but I'm hearing that they're surrounded with supports. They're invited to move forward in dealing with their addiction. And to me, all that is great. And nobody's going to set this up until they come back to the commission and say, we're going to put it here, and here's how we're going to protect people, here's what we're going to do. I think this is a great idea, and I support it.
Mr. Urban?
Well, since that amendment I made didn't get a second, we're just basically in the discussion mode still, which is great, because clearly I'm learning as we go. It seems to me that we could dispense with all this amending stuff if I could just get assurances that the commission will rule on. Will the commission get a chance to vote on licensing this needle exchange program when it gets started?
The way the ordinance is drafted, the city commission grants the authorization to a qualifying agency to engage in the program.
Okay, that settles it then.
Is there any other discussion? Excuse me, Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes. The motion passes. Next are reports and legislation. City Manager Ritzma, do you have a report?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Clerk Borling?
No, Your Honor.
City Attorney?
Nothing tonight, Vice Mayor.
All right, thank you. Finally, we're at citizen comments. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any topic should come forward to the podium. Please give us your name and whether you live in the city. You will have 4 minutes to make your comments. Good evening.
My name is Nehemiah Scudder. I live in the city. I have just a very brief comment tonight. I've noticed that many times on various issues, Mattie Jordan is very outspoken. Why doesn't she run for city commission herself? Why just criticize those who are trying to do their best on the city commission? Mattie Jordan, if you hear this, why don't you run for city commission instead of just criticizing? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Ann Zumlick, and while I do not reside in this city, I am a lifelong resident of Kalamazoo County. I'm here again to ask you to help us save the Nazareth complex from destruction. We have, over the past few weeks, we have an increase in the number of people who have signed our petition. We are now over 1,750 people who have an interest in these buildings. I am also aware of other organizations who still have an interest in utilizing specifically the Mother House for social services. What I'm asking you as a commission, because I know that you have limitations as a governing body and what you can do to help move this forward. There are limitations. There's a hierarchy with everything, including within the Catholic Church and these sisters. What I'm asking you to do as a commission is to revisit your ability to put a resolution and to enact a moratorium on any further destruction until we can bring the sisters back to the table. And I'm asking you, as the commissioners, to invite these sisters back to the table. There are parties that are willing to come and have a discussion with them to look at this again and how we can utilize this building to address our issues. We've had a lot of great things talked about here today. We take pride in our diversity. We talk about the safety of our community. We talk about the issues with drug addiction and treatment. I know that we have limited space in our community to house for transitional housing and individuals who are seeking drug rehabilitation. These are the types of things, including homeless teens, as well as unwed mothers. There were many things that were talked about on the table more than 2 years ago when the nuns shut the door on the conversation. I'm asking you to invite them back. put that moratorium in place and ask them to come back. You have a little bit more clout than many of us citizens here, and I'm asking you to use the powers that you have for the good of this community. I thank you for your consideration. I thank you for the conversations we've had and for accepting our communications and the great work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Louis Zemlik, also Deacon Louis Zemlik. I'm a deacon in the Catholic Church. Kind of a continuation. I'm Ann's husband. So 2 months ago, we entered into this. We were going to kind of do a little tag along on trying to save Nazareth to see who was involved in it. We found out nobody was involved in it. And when the discussion talks broke down between the Diocese of Kalamazoo and the sisters about 2.5 months ago, I was shocked, quite frankly. As we get into this further and further, we find that not everything has been truthful and honest in this negotiation process. There's been a lot of back and forth, you know, who said what, and I really believe that they could come together if we slowed them down, if you slowed them down. There's been a lot of conversation tonight about recovery. Myself, I'm in recovery too. I've been sober for 25 years. I know the need in this community. You folks have got the power to be able to slow things down and to be able to say to not only the sisters, but the diocese, people within the community, that destroying this complex, destroying the Mother House and this historic chapel out there, no one, we haven't found one person yet who has said, that sounds like a good idea. Let's tear down the most historic, beautiful building in the city of Kalamazoo, especially that's anchors the northeast side of Kalamazoo. It is the most beautiful structure in our community, and we're willing to let them tear it down just because I don't know whether they're going to plan on putting a shopping mall in there or whatever. But I think this decision is being made by Cleveland, in Cleveland, Ohio, by the management of the Sisters of St. Joseph. 10 years ago, they came and started to manage the Kalamazoo location here, and it has been hell ever since. I found out another thing too. The city council in Cleveland now doesn't have public comments. So I wonder about, you know, if they think this is the way things get done. But Kalamazoo, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to slow things down, bring people back to the table. You know, to make this decision within 90 days, to tear down the most beautiful structure that could be used not only for drug rehabilitation, mothers, a place for people to stay. We have a huge problem with this. But this is a difficult decision that you folks will have to make. A very difficult decision. Maybe not a very popular decision. But it is a decision of truth. And the truth of this matter. And you all know what has happened behind the scenes. That this stuff can be brought back to the table. A simple resolution to talk about it, to bring it back up 2 weeks from now, I guarantee you, we will have them back at the table. There's also the possibility too for us to bring in new sisters. I know of sisters that are in Rwanda that would love to be here in America. And the help that they could bring to this community, the change that they could bring to this community, the change that they could bring to Kalamazoo, the heart of Kalamazoo, with good quality health care. I hope you make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Name is Maddie Jordan Woods, 902 West Patterson. First, I was going to get up and make a comment concerning a comment that was made with my name in it. But one thing I love about the City Commission this time is that we all get to speak what we think. And I think that everybody has a right to feel that way. So I'm glad he said it. He feels it and he said it to my face. But I'm going to say again in our community that I hope that we look at how it affects the populations that don't have the lawyers, that don't have the health departments get behind them and use data that makes no sense to the people in the community that's affected by what happens. And I surely hope that when we're talking about who gets to do the program, that it is real clear, because does that mean that if I create an organization and I say that I would like to pass out needles in a particular place, that I would have to use data from there? So I'm going to say again, I hope our commission and I hope our commission looks at how it is affected. And you know what? It may have been in Grand Rapids for 10 years, but it was in Kalamazoo for 2 years. And everyone saw what happened. The people who ended up being the outreach workers relapsed. So yeah, you can spit data from other places, and we can talk about reports, but we know what happened here. So I am going to hear that they will have to come up with a plan. But if the plan says, hey, we're going to do outreach, and in our outreach, well, they can get it. And somebody said something about, don't they have to exchange them? Well, no, that's what they would like to do, but that isn't a requirement, unless when this commission looks at it, they're going to say that that's a requirement, that it is an exchange. And if the needles start there, and the data about what is going to happen, what, prove that the program worked. How do you prove that the program worked for a group of people and it completely, I won't say completely destroyed, because the North Side is very resilient. There's a lot of things have happened in our community, and we're still standing strong, and we're going to stay standing strong. So I'm not going to say it's going to destroy us, but I would like to know, how do you determine that as a result of a program that got approved by the city commission, that did that program effectively only distribute where they said they were going to? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kenneth Barnard. I should introduce myself as for my role, but I'm an attorney who's worked in criminal law here in this community for going on 22 years. I'm a resident of Ashtamo Township. I wanted to just make you aware of an opportunity to learn about criminal justice reform. We have an event Wednesday evening at the Douglas Center talking specifically about bail issues and incarceration, pretrial incarceration. It's going to begin at 6:30 this Wednesday. I've got Judge Henneke, who's the Chief Judge of the 8th District Court, and also I've got David LeGrand coming in, who's talking about some reform issues in the bail arena and legislation. So I think it'd be a great opportunity for people who would like to know more about that and how bond is set locally here in Kalamazoo to come out Wednesday evening and learn a little more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Luke Zemlik. I'm not a citizen of Kalamazoo. I live in Portage. I'm here to encourage you to also delay destruction of the Mother House at Nazareth. It is my understanding that they got permission to destroy it under false pretenses that no one was interested in the property. Now, my understanding is that what they mean when they say that is that nobody with their same vision is interested in that property, which for them is reducing their carbon footprint. Now, if you look at that building out there, it's pretty easy to say that whole thing gets demolished and gets put into a landfill. That's a bigger footprint than if it is to keep it running. It has been updated just 10 years ago with plumbing and electric. It's a good, viable building. So I would encourage you to do that. Secondly, on the ordinances to repeal the loitering and the adoption to amend the other ordinance, I find it interesting that you say, Commissioner Anderson, that you're not opening a door. Well, it seems to me that you guys opened the door with the first part of the agenda, G2, by removing that so that you could open the door so that you didn't step on your own feet when then you guys are giving out the drug paraphernalia. Now, I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that I've seen a couple of documentaries about these exchanges, and I do know that citizens in, I think it's in California, they've noticed that there are more needles on the streets because of these exchanges, not less. Now, I also used drugs for a long time. I never shot up, but I do know what it's like to want to get high, and you want to get high now. You don't want to go to an exchange or go in whatever you have to do to get that high, but if you have a needle there, you're going to use it. And you'll find some way, some risky way to clean it. You know, putting it in boiling water or running it under the flame. The only reason they're going to go to the exchange is because they need a needle to get high, because they don't have one. There will be more needles on that street, not less. When I was in high school, there were parents that allowed us to get drunk at their houses. They told us to put our keys in the bowl, you know, and they said, you know, tell your parents you're wherever else, you know, it's making them excuse. And their, you know, idea of this was that we're going to get drunk anyway. So why don't you do it here at my house where it's safe, where nothing bad's going to happen. Now, they were bad parents. As a 32-year-old man today with kids of my own, and looking back, those were bad parents. I would hate it if my kid went over to that person's house and found that out. Now, all the kids are grown up, and it's us in this room. And we got to decide together, do you think that those were bad parents that let me get drunk at their house? I think they were. And I think you people know that they were as well.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Alejandro Rodriguez. I don't live in the city of Kalamazoo. I live actually right outside of the Comstock area, but I spend 7 days out of the week in Kalamazoo and in the neighborhoods where all these things occur and happen. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to allowing us to talk. And I want to just share what's in my heart right now, and I want to speak on behalf of all the children and all the youth that live in these neighborhoods. What I want to say is I agree with a lot of things that were discussed today, but my strongest agreeing is in changing the methods that we're doing things. If I were to have a title, that title would be I'm a servant for Christ, right? And there's people like me, individuals like me, who are willing to go their extra mile and go to those places and clean the streets up. There's individuals that may be able to fund certain things to do that. And there's individuals that are going to be out there that want to do the work. And that's where I come in. I want to be an individual who goes out there and actually does the work that most people can't do or won't want to do. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I've been in that environment. I lived that lifestyle, and I've done those things. And being able to escape from that, and what God is using me for is being able to send me back to help change that and be a light in those dark places. Now, there's a lot of things that were discussed today that are great, and a lot of things that are working and some that aren't working, but the best thing to consider is that love overcomes all these things. And if we can approach these things with an approach of love, saying, like the brother behind me said, if we can just put ourselves in their shoes, or send people like myself, who was a soldier in the streets, who wants to go and make a difference, but I'm going to meet them where they're at and say, look, I used to be here, I used to be this is what I used to do, but now look at me. And I just want to, I really want to encourage everybody in this room to consider the fact that those people that we're talking about, the people that we're discussing about, the people who are using these substances, they're not in the state of mind to hear these things. So when we approach them in a way where we're lecturing them or beating them in the head with this, they're not going to receive it in a way where it's going to work. But if we can approach it at a peaceful way and assure that, like the brother Commissioner Urban, he wants to see results. Everybody wants to see results. But me, myself, I've come to realize that I might not see and I might not live long enough to see the fruits of the benefit. and that's okay. I just want to make sure that what we're doing now can make an impact for the youth to come. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I've already come to realization, I'm aware that all the work that God is doing through me, I may not see that, but that's okay, because my daughter can pick up where I leave off, and she might not see the fruits of that, and that's okay, because her children will pick up where she leaves off. So I just come to realize that there's individuals like myself who live in this state of Michigan, and I spend more than 90% of my time in these communities, in the hood. I have a ministry called Healing of the Hood, and what we're doing is we're just trying to bring healing to these places, and it's needed like deeply. But I just want to encourage us to remember that without love, none of this is possible. It doesn't matter how much data or how much numbers or how much stuff we see or other companies that it doesn't matter if we're not doing it with love, because at the end of the day, that overcomes everything. So I just want to encourage you guys to please take a few minutes at the end of the day to consider what can you do as an individual, not even your title, not even the name, but what can you do as an individual to show somebody love, be a representation of love, and be a light somewhere where it's dark at. So I just want to encourage you guys to consider that, and remember my name, Alejandro Rodriguez, and I'm willing to be a vessel to go to places where some of us might not want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Christine Howard Hernandez, and resident of Galesburg, and I am here to encourage the saving of Nazareth. It is not just a Catholic thing, or even Christian. You can be whatever, but to appreciate architecture, beauty, truth, and history. These sisters, and it's really about honoring these sisters also, because they were instrumental in education. They taught at many of the schools here and other places in Michigan and in other states too, but and also they were instrumental in starting medical care in Kalamazoo. They came and they were the beginnings of Borges Hospital. Anyway, it would be a travesty to for this building to be demolished, because it's just it's not only beautiful, but it's just a part of Kalamazoo, and there's people that pay thousands of dollars to go to other countries and see their treasures, and and we're going to demolish. We're going to tear down something of beauty here that is is an attraction, and that even if it's not kept open for just for the beauty of it, there's so many uses, like Louis said, that it could be used for. But we owe a debt of gratitude to these ladies that worked for not much. I know that because my mother would take food to them, and the nuns at the end of the table would say, "Oh, good, we'll get something this time," because by the time the food went around, they didn't always get much. Anyway, it's just so dear to me. And if they tear down the beautiful fieldstone wall that is out there, that is just, I mean, you can't imagine the work that went into that. The hauling those stones and building that beautiful entrance. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Jeff Messer, city resident. First, I want to address the Nazareth supporters. The previous speaker and the earlier speaker are unclear on what the plans are for out there. A site plan has been filed with the Community Planning and Development Department. There was a special meeting of the Planning Commission in late April where the site plan was reviewed. That's unusual. I've been going to the Planning Commission meetings since 2013, and that's the first time they've had a meeting where they review the site plan, because normally the site plans are done by administrative committee. So if anyone wants a site plan, conveniently, Community Planning and Development Director Rebecca Kick is in the back of the room, so they can talk to her. The site plan, it's unusual to have a site plan. Normally a site plan, you're going to build something, but this is a demolition or deconstruction plan. They plan to keep the wall according to the site plan. But everything else, there's 5 buildings. They're going to tear down everything except for Dillon Hall. So they're going to tear down 2 residence halls, the mother house, the place where County Human Services used to be, and then there's like another building. I'm not really terribly familiar with the campus, but there's 5 buildings they're going to tear down, and they're also going to remove all the underground utilities too. And I guess that's the real reason why there's a site plan, because they're going to have to remove the underground utilities. So they're going to clear the site except for the wall. So if you want the site plan, talk to the Community Planning Development Department, or if you're here at the meeting tonight, to Director Kick. I do have a request for the Nazareth supporters, though, please. I think some of you know my big pet peeve is people who illegally place their signs on city property, particularly right-of-ways. The piece of land between the land on which the road sits is called the right-of-way. It includes the paved road surface, the gutter, the curb, the grass, and the sidewalk. And sometimes I've seen, sometimes there's even additional land beyond the sidewalk. I've seen the survey markers. And that is city property, or in some cases, Michigan Department of Transportation property. You may not place a sign in that property without city commission approval. And I found a lot of those Save Nazareth signs, not in front of people's houses, but on the long side of our major roads, and that's illegal. And I appreciate your cause, and I do agree that those buildings would be a waste to get rid of them, but please stop placing your signs in the right-of-way. And that goes also for the Kalamazoo Mud Run, who's currently placing signs in the right-of-way. College Hunks Moving and Storage, I've been removing their signs for almost 2 years, and other ones, so please do that. Quick question for Clerk Borling or someone to answer when the public comment ends. Is next Monday's special meeting of the City Commission going to be available live on the city's YouTube channel and or PMN's channel and or actually on cable? So you can answer that question after the public portion is over. And then the final thing is I still am opposed to the City Commission appointing someone who intends to run for election this fall, because you're granting them the benefits of incumbency, because the Robert Sanabro and Eric Cunningham, they were appointed, they were elected. Mary Balkema was appointed county treasurer, she was elected. Virtually every single judge in Kalamazoo County wasn't really elected. The judge retired, and then the governor appointed someone, and then they ran unopposed. So virtually we have no contested judicial elections in Kalamazoo County. And I don't know of anyone who's been appointed to one of these elected positions who then runs for the seat who doesn't win it. So, and now it's even more important than the 3 other times this commission has done this process. This will be the 4th time in the past 15 years that the city commission has, you could give them a 4-year term. It's just, the incumbency advantage is just way too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the commission? Good evening.
Good evening. Dr. Nettleton, William Nettleton, resident of the city of Kalamazoo. Just want to provide a point of clarification that the data does not support the hypothesis that implementation of a syringe service program increases the distribution of used needles within a population or an entire community in public places. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, commissioners, we are now at commissioner comments. Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you. I just want to say I very much appreciate the real concerns of the people in the neighborhoods about the effect of a needle exchange program on the people in the neighborhood. So I would require that when people come to us and say we want to set up the program here, that part of the condition for setting up the program would be that they closely monitor the effect of the program on the neighborhoods and keep in touch with the people in the neighborhoods to make sure that this is not doing harm to the people in the neighborhoods.
Commissioner Urban?
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor Knott. I wanted to comment on the last last chance request made by the people who want to save the Nazareth complex. I think many people in the community, myself included, are very distressed that the sisters have gone ahead and applied for a demolition permit for those structures. But they're the owners of that property. And in this country, property is ownership is 9/10 of the law. If the city owned it, we would do something different, but we don't own it. And our ability to force an unwilling negotiator, an unwilling party to negotiate is highly limited. I've heard no evidence that the sisters are willing to change their minds about this. Nothing has happened in the last 2 weeks that shows me that there's something afoot that would cause the Sisters of St. Joseph to change their minds. They are set on doing this, and as private property owners, we are limited in what we can do. Now, that's my opinion. If somehow amongst us we find the mayor and 2 commissioners who want to put this on the agenda in a subsequent meeting, we can do that. Within 2 weeks, though, a lot may happen within city administration that may allow that demolition permit to be approved. We're not going to. It's not the policy of the administration to slow walk anything while the commission decides on what to do. So that's the administration's own processes are at work, and I for one, am not going to interfere with it. But in 2 weeks, if I can find an ally who is willing to go with me and put it back on the agenda to issue a moratorium, we'll have a discussion on it. But no guarantees that the vote will be in favor of a moratorium. So that's how it lays as far as I can see. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Cunningham?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So I just wanted to speak to one of the consent agenda items that we voted yes on earlier. When you saw the hesitancy upon voting is I didn't speak up when the Vice Mayor asked, was there any comment from Commission? But one of the things that I've been intentional on is the understanding of profiling, over-policing, and targeted policing. Oftentimes, being born and raised in the community at risk on the east side of Kalamazoo, a lot of the individuals who I am close to, they want to see change, period. No questions asked. That's what they want to see, period. Sometimes I get stuck between when is it time to be an activist, when is it a time to be a champion, when is it time to be an advocate. And one of the things that I highlight is that I think there's a time and a place for everything. One of the most important jobs as an elected official is understanding policy. And as you read through policy, I look at that policy as an African-American male who was born and raised here in Kalamazoo, who understands the interactions between officers, who understands the interactions between individuals that were born and raised on my block, in my neighborhood, on my corner, And those are the individuals I'm probably most connected to because I spent 18 years of my life within a 5 square block radius. Also, I also bring the lens of an individual who has went to Western and KVCC to earn 3 different degrees. I also am an individual who have spent 15 years with the state of Michigan and now an individual who spends 40 hours professionally serving our youth for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I think that at the end of the day, what that says is there's a lot of different thoughts, ideas, practices that have been in place that some work, some don't work. The part of it that has to be intentional is it's unique for every space. I think that as we make some of these overarching policies, they will affect different communities differently by the nature of the beast. And that is something that is very hard as you sit in this role to understand, A, how that impacts, when is the dividing line, and where is it gray? Because too often we get into that gray area of what this looks like. So I know with some of the things that were brought up tonight, especially when it comes to our public safety, I am intentional on being diplomatic with our public safety. I am intentional with not burning bridges and to gain an understanding and to respond in love and to have continued dialogue even when I do not feel like having continued dialogue any further. And I catch flack in certain communities, and it's cool. That's fine. That's part of my role. I get stabbed in the back with certain communities. That's fine. I take responsibility. That's what I signed up for. But irregardless, I know for a fact where my heart is at. And I fight day in and day out for this community, hands down, no questions asked. And I say this to say, overall, there has to be continuous change. Individuals would be upset with change. Individuals would be uncomfortable with change. And one of the things that I want to highlight is I do believe we need to have targeted policing. Targeted policing will assist us and help us when it comes to issues such as the X train that is a nuisance or issue, an ongoing issue that affects a population who do not deserve the type of effects that are taking place in their communities. But then, you know, I have to have those ongoing communications with our chief to have a clear understanding that we're not overstepping our boundaries by going into over-policing, because that is also in the same community where this nuisance of an X train is at. So there is a lot of different caveats and variables that go into play that has to be thought through anytime we're having a conversation about anything. So I say this, I said all of that also to say this. I will never quiet an individual in regards to how they feel. I will never argue an individual in regards to how they feel, because they have a valid reason for that feeling and that intent, period. And so one thing that, thank you, Alejandro, for pointing out, love has to be a consistent variable in all of it, period. If I love Alejandro, although I may not agree with Alejandro, we are at least going to come to the table and discuss. And when we don't agree, you know what we're going to do? We're going to continue to come to the table and discuss. And you know what we're going to do when we don't agree then? We're going to respect each other, love each other, and come to the table and discuss. There's no holding or harboring of hard feelings. We have work to do. And if you aren't about the work, then I cannot side with that, period. What I can side with is going about the business of this community as best as possible with the lens and the knowledge and the understanding and the inclusiveness of this community. I am an African American male. I love my African American heritage. I will die as an African American. There's no question about that. But as of right now, I am a representative of 70,000 individuals, and my expectation of myself and my colleagues is to understand that we will always be diplomatic, respectful, love individuals of high character, and we will respond accordingly and continue to change. Because at the end of the day, we have issues in our policing that is that needs to be continuously addressed. We have issues in our community, whether it be drug addiction, whether it be yard signs put in the wrong place, that have to be continuously addressed. And I do not put hard lines in the sand because at the end of the day, I understand the nature of man will always have an issue where we fall short. And the nature of man should always be a response of love. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wasn't going to say anything, but have been moved to point out, as somebody who works in political strategy and comms, we've heard it all tonight. The environmental impact, housing, supportive services, it's an attraction. I got to tell you, I am not interested in opening back up the Nazareth conversation. The sisters have determined what's best for them and their order. They're able-minded adults. It's their property, their building. They speak for themselves. As far as I'm concerned, this matter is settled. And I am not interested in reopening this conversation and creating a precedent where we vote on an issue 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, and then revisit it, because there are dozens of issues that could come back at us at any given point in time, and that will prohibit us from doing the work as Commissioner Cunningham just stated. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.